Daniela Shena Bat Yoshua Felek.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Shi'ur tonight is sponsored in your memory. So we should all pay extra close attention and do our best to retain, to interact, to ask questions, obviously. So we had established last week that God created the world. That was huge. Took us a while to digest that, but the point that we needed to make and to really hit home was that the idea is one that is very fundamental, very basic. It should be the backdrop of everything that we do, everything that we study, everything that we learn. Give you a nice anecdote on this topic. Rav Rabbi, when we were learning by him, so he very often would come out of left field with a very deep, mystical, Kabbalistic concept. And so he maintained very firmly, maintained that the most abstract aspects of the Torah, the deepest things you can possibly learn, must and will always have some kind of practical application. Just because it's abstract doesn't mean that it's impractical. So if I were to tell you that the non-physical world has a certain hierarchy, a structure to it, some angels are considered to be on a higher level than others, how prophets predict the future, or how miraculous supernatural feats can be effectuated by human beings, you would tend to think, well, that's interesting, but what does it mean for me? Why do I care? I'm not floating on carpets, I'm not resurrecting the dead, I'm not doing anything quite as fascinating. Why don't we learn something more technical and more practical, like the halachot of Shabbat, or how to put on tefillin, kosher food, etc. So Rav Rabbi's answer would be that these tremendously abstract concepts will always influence the way that you do things, even at the simplest, most basic level. Just knowing the fact that there is a natural order to the world. The natural order to the world is only natural for people who live their lives in a kind of a natural way. And if you choose to live your life in a supernatural way, you may be able to accomplish some supernatural things. As a matter of fact, the more supernatural you choose to make your lifestyle, the more supernatural the things you may be able to pull off. I don't think there's anything supernatural about wanting to do cool stuff but not being ready to change your lifestyle in order to do it. So apparently there's a whole lifestyle change involved. The degree to which I change my lifestyle, the degree to which I can expect supernatural things to happen for me or by me or around me. And we can start a whole discussion on, divine providence, how Hashem interacts with us, how what we do influences what happens. So it sounds really abstract until you basically make a simple connection. All these things are practical. All these mystical concepts, all these abstract ideas, all the philosophy, it's all practical. It's just a function of where you stash it, where you file the information, and how frequently you call it up, how frequently you refer back to it. So, we said last week, the more basic, the more fundamental, the more foundational the information is, the more of an impact it's going to have on everything that you do, as long as you bear that perspective in mind. Very good. So, just to recap, we read last week, I believe it was Abigail. Just repeat the first 3 lines that you read, because it was really hard for us to understand last time. Not because of the accent, it was the depth, it was the profundity.
I know.
Yeah.
The Creator. Every Jew must believe and know that there exists a first being, without beginning or end, who brought all things into existence and continues to sustain them. This being is God.
Okay, fair enough.
So this is clear in the face, straight in the face of those who might say that there may have been a God who created the universe and who stepped away and kind of let it run on its own.
Absolutely, and evidence to this would be the providence, intervention, hashgacha, how things happen since the world was created. We believe that Hashem continues to interact, continues to, let's say, sustain us even if we don't necessarily deserve it. And all these questions that we should be asking already at this point. Just because he said it doesn't mean we have to, accept it without blinking and move on. So this implies that there is a constant interaction. So if I thought that Hashem just gave me a whole bunch of stuff when I was born, kind of like Monopoly, and there's the question of how I make my acquisitions, well, sometimes people have all of a sudden, sudden changes of fortune. So you can inherit a windfall, you can suffer a terrible loss. Things can suddenly start or suddenly stop or suddenly change direction. And we believe that your interaction with Hashem, your relationship with Hashem is dynamic to the point that you can be the one steering these changes. You'll get the occasional screwball, that's okay. We're not prophets, we can't predict everything, but since Hashem constantly, right, continues to sustain them, that implies a continuous action. It's not something that started, was set into motion and then stopped. So the way in which Hashem continues to sustain the world is going to depend to a greater or lesser extent on how we interact with Hashem, how much of this we choose to accept and to live by. Yeah.
So I hate to kind of derail on a metaphysical tangent, but there exists an inherent contradiction in this paragraph and in the idea that Hashem is infinite, which is that if Hashem is in fact infinite, from our perspective, it's impossible, or it's a paradox, that He should both exist infinitely and we should exist in the finite. Meaning,
define the paradox in
infinite and finite somehow coexist.
Okay.
So
you perceive this as a paradox in and of itself.
So if He's infinite, then everything we perceive to be finite is in fact really just Hashem kind of concealing Himself.
Right. I mean, the quick
and if He's infinite, does that mean that is he in our physical reality? Is He not in our physical reality? If He's not here, quote unquote, where is He?
Okay, I'll give you some quick, I think, workable and livable definitions. Not made in China responses, but something you can work with. No offense to anyone Chinese if I did accidentally insult someone. Hashem created the world, right? Hashem is infinite. There is nothing out of Hashem that can be infinite. Hashem would be, by definition, the only essence, if you will, that is infinite. So Hashem basically created us, if you will, on a short-term lease. In other words, we're here. We have the capacity to come as quick as, if we can borrow some real estate terms. We're here. We have the capacity to, again, adopt more or less of these godly, spiritual, infinite concepts, or we can choose to live our lives according to finite whims and desires and aspirations. At the end of the day, our finiteness will come to its its end, and then we, will no longer be here. And what happens beyond this point is already a topic for discussion. That Hashem created us with limited capacities isn't necessarily a contradiction to Hashem's infinite nature. You would expect that Hashem, as the infinite being, would create other things that are infinite, but that would imply that there is something infinite outside of Hashem, and that's where we would draw the paradoxical line. If you don't follow this perfectly fine, there's a bit of a tangent. I'll give you a really quick thought you can chew on or freeze, and chew on while it's frozen. The Arizal's explanation of this concept has to do with this topic of tzimtzum. People fire this like parakeets and have no idea what they're talking about. Effectively, what he says is as follows. Hashem is infinite. It doesn't make such quick and ready, like microwavable logical sense that Hashem should create something that's imperfect or even capable of imperfection. So, how do we explain that Hashem, who is perfect, created the world that is imperfect? His answer, not even on one foot, on one toe, is that Hashem effectively blocked out a certain hypothetical space and removed His influence almost entirely from it, and allows the universe to exist within those confines. Which means if He were to completely detach from it altogether, it would cease to exist. There would be nothing. So it's a 99.999% vacuum in which there is enough godliness just to sustain it. It's very easy to imagine all kinds of things. Like my kids inside this play tent that they have now, but no, that's not the idea. The idea is that Hashem created, so in internet programming terms, you'd call this a sandbox, right? You're designing a website, so before the website goes live, you have a sandbox. What's a sandbox? It's a little website that shows you all the practical features, just it doesn't work because it's not plugged in. So you're, it sounds funny, but that's exactly...
So the production environment is Olam Haba?
So what's that?
The production environment is Olam Haba?
This is
the production
environment right now, And the final version is Olam Haba?
Yeah, so this would be right. This would be the beta version. This is testing.
Okay.
So you're here in Olam Hazeh. Basically, the curtains are just on. Some more than others. Don't start with me. I worked with 2 government agencies today.
We don't want to have to edit.
We already insulted the Chinese. I don't want to offend anyone else. But yes. So Hashem created this world as a sandbox. It is temporary. It is limited. And the potential for limitations and for finiteness were all imposed by Hashem by withdrawing, so to speak.
But I can see philosophically where those who are against the concept of Tzimtzum are coming from, because it implies an idea that we can't understand. I don't think anyone is against Tzimtzum. I think there are people who debate whether or not we should be discussing. The Tzimtzum in Hebrew literally means to diminish.
Okay.
As if to say that Hashem diminished his influence from this particular part. I'll give you one last thing on one foot, and then we're just going to move on, whether you like it or not.
All right.
We need to go back to the human level.
Right. We are slowly descending back into our finiteness, our finity, if you will. Pregnancy starts this way. So what is pregnancy? How can a human being exist? How do human beings come into existence? The same way that Hashem created the universe. It's just a reflection of that. So the baby is created in space, not yet able to pay his or her own rent, so it's space on loan. And the baby's job is to grow, develop his or her own basic life capacities before the baby's actually born. So the baby is kind of in and kind of not, and kind of a part of and kind of not, and kind of attached to and kind of not, kind of connected, kind of not, to its mother's life-giving force through an umbilical cord which will be cut as soon as the baby is born. In some cases not right away, it takes 30-40 years, but that's the bigger picture. So now we've offended the Italians, so you've walked right into it. It's just a matter of time. Just a matter of time.
So we had a discussion.
Most other cultures it's like 2-3 minutes after birth. In some cultures it's like,
we had a discussion like that when we were studying Masifet Chagiga at some point. With the story of the concept of there was a green line.
Exactly.
That's
exactly it.
Hashem was putting like a fence around the.
Yeah, depending on how far you want to run with the concept, it's a little bit. It's a lot to digest in one sitting.
Yeah. No, we don't have
to. No. So that's it. So the idea is that the extent of our understanding and imagination and comprehension is those are the limits of this world, so to speak. So then what happens? So a baby is born and has to figure out for him or herself the whole life concept, and then to go ahead and get married and procreate, to initiate the same cycle, to perpetuate the same cycle. So you were born and had no choice or say in the matter. We're going to assume that for now. It's not necessarily true. And you grow up in order to hopefully elect to reinitiate that process, to take on a more godly role of creating something with imperfections, right? Think about this, guys. It's a little bit, again, I know it's an evening and it was a work day and it's raining outside, but children are reflections of reality. Maybe the whole of life reflects this reality, that a child is born, it has no merits, it has no intellect, no independence, no capabilities, no capacities, nothing. It's pure potential and zero in terms of realizing that potential. And you invest in the child, you hopefully feed it, clothe it, change its diapers, help it pay its credit card bills when it doesn't understand how to control the plastic. At the end of the day, you bring that child to an understanding of what it means to be an adult, to be independent, to earn things, to merit your place in this world, to pay your own rent, to foot your own bills, how not to be a socialist. And then the child learns to initiate that process and develop enough mercy and patience and understanding to incorporate into its own life a void of spirituality, a spiritual deficit of a human being, right? A baby that has absolutely nothing to give to you and is completely dependent upon you and what you're willing to give it. Okay, I say mercy and patience because the Hebrew word for uterus is rahim. right? The etymology of Rahamim, of mercy. So don't tell me the child deserves to be here or has any entitlements or rights, from day one or from birth. Children are born into this world that have nothing but sheer mercy. And the only thing we can hope to give kids that are born into Olam Hazeh is the spiritual and intellectual wherewithal, the emotional strength to initiate a process of, accommodating those that are less perfect and that need this now adults' help to reach perfection. You following me here? I feel like I'm on a very lonely walk. If you get me, just nod politely and make as if you follow. You get what I'm saying? So this is the profoundly godly aspect of being a parent. We need to remind ourselves of this. Why we get married, why we have kids, and why we're
bleeding into the second time.
Pay all these bills and whatever. Yes. Well, right. So there's a natural, there's a synergy. I don't like that word. All right. So we're going to move on, and Yaira is going to help shed some light onto this abstract mysticism. Thank you, Yaira. I appreciate you volunteering.
It is furthermore necessary to know that God's true nature cannot be understood at all by any being other than himself. The only thing that we know about him is that he is perfect in every possible way and devoid of every conceivable deficiency. Keep going.
So that was easy enough. So the only we have to start with the assumption. This is a difficult thing, by the way, because again, you can live in this world and not come to these realizations on your own. We need to remind ourselves that Hashem is perfect in every conceivable sense of perfection. Anything that involves iniquity or deceit or dishonesty, cruelty, negligence, none of these things can be ascribed to Hashem. It's impossible to point your finger at Hashem and say Hashem hates me or ignores me or doesn't care, is uninterested or uninvolved or doesn't desire to help me or doesn't have expectations of me that I should be able to do better, to live better, to be better, etc. So any imperfection that you find does not originate from Hashem. The potential for it does. Hashem created the world. God only knows. You have a government. There's proof of inefficiency and incompetence. So you have some of you thought I was kidding. You have not the Italian government, David. I'm talking about the American. You have individuals. That was corruption. That's a whole other chapter. So you have the capacity to fail, the capacity to lie, to cheat, to steal, to be cruel, to ignore other people's needs and wants and desires, etc. And the potential for it was created by God. Actualizing it, making it happen, realizing this potential is a purely human thing. So take, for example, a classic drasha of Chazal's on this topic. There's a midrash that says when Moshe Rabbeinu is we'll say admonishing the Jews before they actually enter the Promised Land. So he tells them, you have this obligation, responsibility to observe all the mitzvot, avoid the avirot, to love Hashem, to have a fearful respect and awe, if you will. And he says, Lo davar rik hu mikem. Lo davar rik hu mikem. So literally, Lo davar rik hu mikem. It is not something empty of you or from you to do this, as if to say you're not empty of the ability to do this. It's it's a bizarre way of putting it. It's a strange way of saying you're capable of doing this, or don't complain, we can't do this. So the Midrash picks up on the bizarrerie of this expression, and he just says, what is Moshe Rabbeinu trying to say? It's not just you can do this, because he could have said you can do this. He said it in a strange way to teach us something else. You can do this. Lo davar rik hu mikem. It's not empty of you or from you. There's a little bit of grammatical ambiguity in Hebrew. Says the Midrash, ve'im reku mikem. But if you do find this emptiness or this void or this inability, this incapacity, it's from you. Meaning he juxtaposes these words so as to say, it's not that you can't do this. It's that the can't. So it's not a can't from you on your part. And if there is a can't, it's on your part. The pasuk reads beautifully both ways, meaning any shortcoming, any obstacle is pretty much self-imposed. Your inability to understand, your inability to appreciate, your limited perspective, your limited appetite for the truth. How about that? It's a topic that's come up in recent months. A limited appetite for the truth. There's some people who read the news and believe what they read. Listen to the radio and you believe what's on the radio. So if you're inquisitive and you'd like to get to the bottom of the thing, you have to assume that there's a whole truth out there. There's more than one side to the story, and regardless of whatever reporter A, B, or C says about individual X, Y, or Z, I can look into it, I can give the benefit of the doubt. Isn't that what we have to do when you hear from Hara? Someone says, oh, this person is horrible. It's just supposed to have this reflexive reaction. Not necessarily so. I'm sure there's something good about them. Maybe you just perceived this. Maybe it was a bad day. Maybe it was something you did. Maybe it was something you said. You never had to say. So a typical friend will come and say, oh my God, this person did something so disgusting. I hate them, want them to die. And you're going to sit there and say, a good friend would be like, yeah, right, let's kill him. Let's go now. That's like your boss, your friend, your other. A really good friend would say, probably not. You look upset. You want to talk about this at another time? Am I missing some details here? Did you, by any chance, say something or respond in a way that, elicited such a disgusting response? Maybe it's something you said. Maybe it's not what you said, but how you said it. Maybe you perceived this totally wrong. Maybe, if you went down, got to the bottom of it, I'm sure if you looked into what this person said or did, you would nonetheless be able to find a good side to it. I'm sure this person has at least 5 superb qualities that you should learn from him or her. They can teach you something. If you thought about things this way, you'd have an appetite for the truth. You'd be interested in knowing if what you have is everything and what else is missing and what you need to do in order to get it. So we have an appetite for saving money because you see something on the internet and you say, let's compare prices, go to another website, see if we can. Just because someone says, here's the product and here's the price, doesn't mean you have to believe it. People shop around for apartments, they shop around for clothing, for cars, for houses. When it comes to the truth, great quote. I found myself quoting recently. So I got to find the originator of it, but I found it in a book of business aphorisms. It was just clever sayings about business that are just true because they're true. As rare a commodity as the truth has always been, its supply was ever in excess of demand. Chew on that. As rare a commodity as the truth has always been, so the truth is hard to find, the supply was still in excess of demand. It's not like people run to the truth or are dying to hear it or know what to do with it when it does hit them in the face. Yeah, hang on to that one. So, any deficiency, any obstacle, any barrier is effectively a figment of your imagination or a product of your own deficiency, a product of your own iniquity. So you might be upset, and you may or may not be warranted or justified in being upset. There may be something you can do about it, maybe there's not. Maybe you're trying to change things you have no business changing. Maybe you have expectations that don't make any sense. Maybe you believe you're entitled to certain things you have no reason to believe you're entitled to. Well, my friend has such and such, why shouldn't I have it? Well, we have a mitzvah not to say things like that. Right? We have such a concept, lo tahmod. So it's a pretty classic example. Do you know what else your friend has and doesn't have? You want to sit down and do a profit and loss statement? I'm doing my taxes right now. I despise the experience like you have no idea. Looking for 2 cents in a transaction from a year and change ago. So, do you have all the details? Have you availed yourself of all of the evidence? Can you emphatically ascertain that you know the truth and it's unfair that she has this and you only have that? Or you expect this and, why did you get that? These imperfections begin with us. And then when you're looking through broken glasses, you see reality crooked. And that's again, just going to come back to us. Don't ascribe these things to God. But Yair is not finished. He's still mad. Go ahead.
These things are known by tradition from the patriarchs and prophets. With the revelation at Sinai, all Israel perceived them and gained a clear grasp of their true nature. They then taught them to their children, generation after generation, until this very day. Moshe had thus commanded them, Devarim 4:9, you shall not forget the things that you saw with your own eyes, and you shall make them known to your children, to your children's children.
Okay, powerful enough. Basically, there is 50,000 watts today. Basically, what we're saying is that, in a very practical way, we can't be at Har Sinai all the time. It's not possible for us to be on top of the world, to be totally plugged in, to have these revelations all the time. We had a tremendous revelation at Har Sinai, and then in our own private day-to-day lives, assuming that we in this current lifetime and incarnation, haven't been to Har Sinai and haven't received prophecy just yet, we have to accept the fact that there were those who did. Right? I submit to the authority, to the recollection, to the transmission of the previous generations. You do this all the time, 100 times a day, in all kinds of fields, not just in Torah. When you go to a doctor, right? Assuming not a crooked doctor, like a genuine licensed one. If you go to a doctor and you submit to the doctor's understanding, or lack thereof, of the nature of his or her field. So if I and ask her, what should I do? Eat more of this or less of that? She'll say something and I'll believe it. Probably paying good money for it, and I acknowledge this person's an authority in this particular field, so I accept it. If I go to an accountant and I take some tax advice, well, hopefully the accountant's more knowledgeable than I am. Not hard to do in taxes, but the accountant's going to give me advice, take responsibility for the legal ramifications of the advice, and I submit to the accountant's expertise. When it comes to previous generations, all of a sudden we get a little bit skeptic. We like to believe that nowadays in modernity we know everything and they know nothing. And if only they knew what we know, if only they had computers, they would have stopped keeping Shabbat. You know, if they had technology, if they had modernity, they would what? Get married later, have kids later, have less kids, not have kids. We like to make these crazy connections between, well, you know, nowadays in society, specialization of society, it's expected if you want to get a really good job, because we all have to have really good jobs, you have to get a master's, you have to get a PhD, you have to be in school till you're 30-something, residence, specialty, training, etc. We take these things for granted. As if to say, if Moshe Rabbeinu were alive today, he wouldn't have received prophecy till he was done with school. Like, he stuck around, finished a degree, maybe gotten 2 or 3. He'd be one of those hotshot, like MD, PhD, or, you know, JD, MD. So we like to believe we know everything. We like to believe we know better than everyone else. We don't have a very grounded respect for the wisdom of the ages. The same wisdom that kept the ages alive until today. What made the world possible is conventional wisdom. So I'm not saying everything about antiquity was perfect, but we tend to lose sight of the fact that there's probably a whole lot more right than wrong with antiquity. Another great quote for you guys tonight. Write these things down, they're gems. Former President of the U.S., Woodrow Wilson. Change is not progress. Do not conflate these two concepts. You can change something, and you can change it for the better, you can change it for the worse. Nobody promised you that it's going to get better after you... Why'd you change it? How'd you change it? Based on what? What did you expect? How much did you put in? What did you get out? Some people think that changing things is naturally good. Right? Change. There have been presidential campaigns built on change.
Oh, you would have loved the French presidential campaign. Le changement, c'est maintenant. Change is now.
Change is now. And a change for the better or a change for the worse? It's an amazing thing. Here's a practical halachic application of this. I get this a few times a month. Someone calls and asks me, you know, my mazal is not so good, whatever, I don't have a job, or I don't like my job, I'm married, I'm not married, I'm married and I don't like my wife or my husband, so I want to change my name, right? I want to change my name. Why? Because it says in the Gemara, Masechet Rosh Meshana Shem, Meshana Mazal, you change your name and you change your mazal. Does it say in the Gemara that you change your name and everything's going to get better? Are your problems really going to stop when you change your name, if you add a letter, if you add a middle name, or if you delete one? What if?
Said this. He really liked his apartment and his mazal was really good, and he quoted these as Meshineh Makom, Meshineh Mazal. He said, I really don't want to move. Actually, I want to move, but I really don't want to move because my mazal is pretty good right now. Right.
So this is the risk that you run. So what if I were to tell you that you want to change your name because you know somebody who has your name who has bad luck? And again, let's assume the name is her biggest problem, right? You decided you're going to change your name, and you expect your luck to get better or worse. Where's the promise? Where's the guarantee? Where are all these millions of people who changed their names and all of a sudden hit the lotto and made it big? You know,
that would be too easy.
You would think, right? So you change your name. Well, if your luck is really bad like couldn't get worse, we change names. Someone who's got a chronic illness, or God forbid, a terminal disease or condition. Those are grounds for considering such a thing. And even then, you probably should be looking at more than one aspect of your life, but just one of those gut reactions that we have. There's got to be an easier or quicker fix than this. Recently, someone who was going through some difficulties told me that she had been through some ups and some downs. Wanted to know if I know the name of someone who could check mezuzot. So maybe the mezuzah is good, maybe it's not. Is there anything more tangible and more practical in your life that you can look into and adjust before you blame the result? So, assuming everything in your life was perfect, and this is the only problem that you had, it'd be easy enough to point to this and say, this is what's wrong with my life and what I have to change. If there's anything else wrong with your life, and you have the ability to change it, maybe that's a better place to start. Maybe it's more spiritually responsible you assume more of the responsibility for such things. Very good. So we have a tradition, we have a transmission. The ancients knew what they were doing. They weren't gullible, they weren't imbeciles. We can't assume, say what you will about your own grandparents. I mean, I loved mine and I respect their judgment. And they felt pretty strongly about tradition being tradition, about, we had prophets. There were people who knew better than us how things, the interface, the interaction between the physical world and the non-physical world works, what Hashem expects of us and what He doesn't, and they lived their lives accordingly. If I choose to change from this tradition, I may be right, I may be wrong. I personally would side with antiquity and convention over reinventing the wheel. Is society today any happier for all of its changes than it was back in the day? Every other day, a study comes out, more technology, the more affordable and more luxurious life becomes, people just get miserable. I'm not saying third world countries are a place to go if you want to be happy, but people unfortunately have not struck gold when it comes to their degree of contentment and gratification in life. And nonetheless, they keep on running in the same direction, which is away from antiquity. So, going to, go ahead, Chloe, if you'd like to read for us, please, last paragraph on page 31.
Sure. These concepts can also be logically verified by demonstrable proofs. Their veracity can be demonstrated from what we observe in nature and its phenomena. Through such scientific disciplines as physics and astronomy, certain basic principles can be derived, and on the basis of these, clear evidence for these concepts is deduced. We will not occupy ourselves with this, however, but will rather set forth the well-known basic principles handed down by tradition. These we will present in an authentic framework arranged in a comprehensive manner.
The point that he's making is that everything in the physical world points to maybe what we would call today, and I don't want to put this in his mouth, something along the lines of intelligent design, right? Like it's too bizarre, too coincidental that the world works and functions and continues to do so, the universe for that matter, not just the world, despite our best efforts to ruin it. It's an amazing thing. Hashem created the world, all these different forces at odds with each other, and it works, it functions. The human body is massively complex, and every time we understand something, it actually brings us to a lesser and lesser degree of respect for the design. The more we think we can tinker with and we can intervene with, the more we can replace or substitute or change or increase or decrease or augment or diminish, we believe that we have control over it, and therefore we lose respect for it. We forget that it's an amazing, incredible, delicate thing, how many balances, how many hormones, how many compounds, all going around at the same time. We have our ups and our downs, we're tired, we're happy, we're hungry, we're thirsty, we're sick, we get better. These are all miracles. Every single one of these things is a miracle. We only appreciate our finite nature when something goes wrong. And that's when we start to scratch our heads. The point that he's making is that instead of scientists claiming, very arrogantly I should add, that they've figured this out and therefore, disprove God, so the material is just here forever because you think you have a theory that makes sense. Even a bunch of them, stack them all up. Right? You believe in the Big Bang Theory. Great. Where'd all the stuff come from? Who put it there? How did it get so concentrated? Who blew it up? Oh, it's just destined to blow up. Why? Where did it? And really, did anyone ever think about this? And they'll talk about it with arrogance. Who are you to question science? Okay, so I'm not questioning anything. Believe in this theory. Where did that all start? No offense. It's okay for me to ask questions. That's what scientists do. Don't you encourage question asking? They all became Catholics. The infallibility of the scientist. You can't ask questions like that. We don't know. We don't have the instruments or the materials to examine such things. Then why do you make these assertions? I agree with you. There are certain things that we have developed an understanding of, and Halacha accommodates this. We have medical realities. We have things that we maybe recommended in the past and don't recommend today. But the physical world is one of the greatest proofs. The Rambam used to talk about this all the time. Look at astronomy as before they understood in the detail that we have today, but the interaction, the tides, gravity, the moon, the sun. And even if you do hold, I remember I took a a course once in astronomy. They were talking about the rate at which the universe expands. That if it were minimally, I mean by a negligible percentage, any faster or any slower than it currently is, it would either have dissipated into nothingness, there would never have been solar systems or galaxies, or it would have just imploded upon itself and basically reverted back to what it was before the purported bang. It's pretty incredible. The chances are like 1 in a trillion, or beyond that. That's pretty amazing. So a scientist can say, yeah, the fact that we're here is proof that it was total coincidence, but it worked. How can I prove that? Because if that didn't pan out, we wouldn't be here having this discussion. We believe in a little bit more than that. We believe in intent. We believe there's a reason for the creation. There's a reason for it looking and sounding and tasting and smelling and feeling the way that it does. And it was all very much by design. So he's not even going to dwell on this. He doesn't want to bring you physical proofs for spiritual reality. He's mentioning that anyone who is sensitive to these concepts and understanding of the fact life is too complex to have come from nowhere appreciates them and accepts these things as already the first indications that there is an intelligent designer to the universe. Yes. So we'll just one more item real quick. I'm sorry. Don't remember your name? Yeah. Barbara.
Yeah.
Please just read the next item, number 4 for us.
Number 4?
Number 3.
Okay.
Sorry.
It is also necessary to know that God's existence is imperative. It is absolutely impossible that he should cease to exist.
Right. And again, this is to the contrary of those who claim that maybe the universe was intelligently designed, but the clockmaker theory, they call this, like God having designed a clock, wound up the thing and then just let it go, and now it's left to its own devices. So we definitely do not hold this way. We do believe, nonetheless, in periods in your private life, in our national life, our national history, periods of greater or lesser degree of divine intervention. We'd refer to periods like the Holocaust in relatively recent history as a period during which there wasn't as much divine intervention or divine providence as one otherwise have expected. There are reasons and explanations for things like this. We can't claim to know why a given individual perished, but we do have no shortage of discussions on the topic of why bad things happen and what happens, how come our prayers are answered differently at different times, etc. But it'll all be discussed in terms of, how much or how minimally Hashem was intervening on our behalf, where even not intervening is an expression of Hashem's will. If Hashem could have stopped it and didn't, it's not to say that he couldn't have, that he ceased to exist or ceased to be interested in the world, or that he was on a really important phone call or TiVo. Hashem's will would be expressed by allowing those who have their free will to express it without getting too involved. So why doesn't Hashem just get involved, judge everybody, and punish everybody who is wicked? Because a lot of us would probably cease to exist if we were to expect that to happen instantaneously. So as a favor to us, because it doesn't work that way, judge her because I hate her, but that guy's a nice guy, he can continue to live. When there's judgment for everybody, and when there's none, then things like this happen.
But that would be too easy, because if we were judged immediately when there is no, when we do something wrong, we would probably not do something wrong. We would just be too scared and...
Okay, so in order for free will to exist, this is an interesting conundrum. In order for free will to exist, the capacity to hurt and injure other people or objects has to exist. There would be no such thing as murder if Hashem didn't allow people to go that far and actually do it. It's not like you can come close and get zapped all of a sudden, like, oh, I was just kidding, I didn't mean to. You can attempt and perhaps even succeed at doing evil things. That's how evil works, right? You get the chance to do it if you'd like to. There are consequences to it, and you have to be careful. You have to be careful of people who do evil. Third beautiful expression for tonight, this one's in Arabic. Chaf min Allah min dmai chaf minu. Fear. He's laughing because the Libyans
you
use
understood
this one. I got this from my father-in-law, who happens to be Libyan, although not Italian. He would say like this in Arabic, have fear of God and of those who don't fear Him. So have fear of God, because God is omnipotent, is almighty, all-powerful, can do anything at any time, can kill the living, resurrect the dead. Just be careful. Have respect. Have a conscious appreciation of that fact. At the same time, have fear of people who have no fear of God. Why? Because they have no inhibitions, they have no limitations, they have no restrictions, they have no ethical or moral code they abide by. They're pretty much capable of doing anything. You hear it on the news all the time. So you need to be conscious of your relationship with God, appreciating the fact that God could do whatever sees fit at any time, and be fearful of people who choose to exercise their free will and volition in ways that aren't necessarily synonymous with your success and happiness. That's okay, just avoid them. Ignore them to the best of your ability. And if they happen to be the government, just hope for the next one to be better. That's all.
The way I heard this point taught couples well with again the statement that Hashem continues to sustain reality. So the way I heard it taught is analogous to somebody holding up an object, and that object being unable to sustain itself in air without the person or something sustaining it constantly. So it kind of follows naturally point number 3 from the first statement. It's almost redundant, because if Hashem were, so to speak, the physical reality is this cup, and Hashem is I am Hashem, let's say. If I were to let go, it would just stop existing.
Right, so it's the difference between rolling a ball down a hill, which you're the initiator of the action, and what happens from then on, although somehow determined by you, is no longer necessarily under your control. And think along, so we have these analogies today, think in terms of electricity. Like if Hashem weren't constantly supplying life-giving energy to the world, it would cease instantaneously. So there's a maintenance aspect. The world needs to be maintained and supported. If Hashem were to pull the plug, it wouldn't work. We'll end this chapter and continue with halacha in a few minutes. Just a really quick thought on this topic, because we began with this concept of conception, of children coming into this world. Again, it's the first mitzvah that we got, so it must be the highest and holiest. Children come to this world physically. Their conception, their creation is pretty miraculous if you understand the details of it, but it begins with a very tangible, very easy to explain relationship between an embryo, a fetus that is entirely dependent on its mother, progressively less so. It's possible for a child to be born. I mean, as recently as within the past year, I think there were children born or surgically removed at 4.5 months. They managed to save them, which is pretty incredible. So the fetus gets progressively less and less dependent on its mother for survival and existence. Then the kid is born, right? And although not so directly dependent on the mother, meaning it's no longer an umbilical cord, the mother still has to nurse and protect and clothe and feed and change the diapers and file taxes and do the things that are necessary for the child to continue to subsist, basically, right? Well, so it's no longer attachment by the umbilical cord, but there's still some kind of an influence going beyond there. Clearly, children aren't born independent, and God forbid if the mother were to die or become incapacitated, the child would risk death itself. Kabbalistically speaking, we use these analogies. It's kind of metaphorical, but we use them all the time to explain our relationship with Hashem, where we are still constantly dependent upon Hashem, where conception, us being born into Olam Hazeh is maybe a more physical, tangible, perceptible understanding of how we're miraculously sustained until we're born. And now that we're here, we still totally depend on Hashem. So the Kabbalists, the Zohar Kadosh, for example, and in some ways even the Nevi'im will employ terms like a parent, like a mother nursing a child. So I'm not physically nursing from anyone, but the idea that Hashem constantly sustains us, looks after us, takes care of our needs, allows us to exist, maintains the world, the universe, etc., would be likened to either a mother carrying a child in pregnancy, in utero, or a mother caring for a child that implies dependency, but in such a way as to really, we can relate to that. So Hashem created the world such that people procreate in this particular way, with these particular features and details of it, so we can understand what our relationship with Hashem is like. Before you're born, you're completely surrounded by godliness, right? So the womb would be the analogy, the metaphor. And from then on, you become less and less dependent on nothing but sheer chesed. Like your mother just wants you to survive, so she'll do things for you even if you don't deserve them. And hopefully you come to a point where you deserve them. So I want to go to a place in my relationship with Hashem where I'm not nursing at the age of 35. I'm hopefully responsible. I'm earning my keep, pulling my own weight, deserving of what it is that I have. Not that I want to die, I want to stop living, it's just that I want to be the one meriting my own existence, justifying the investments that were made in me by my parents, by Hashem, by all three of them. The Gemara calls them all partners in the creation of the world. And this is the goal for Olam Haba, which is really just the next chapter in the same story. Right? It's my own deeds, my own merits, my own choices, my own judgments, my own decisions that have bought me, acquired for me a portion in the world to come. It's mine. I own it. I deserve it. No one can take it away from me. I didn't get it for free. So although I came into this world completely and totally dependent on everyone around me, I became less and less so until I graduated to the point where I am totally independent. In fact, I try to help other people achieve the same independence, and then you graduate to Olam Haba, where the truth is revealed in a much clearer and more direct way. So take a few minutes, you want make eat something, we'll